glamorous red carpet.
Oh, I can't believe they flew you all the way out here for this.
Hey. Nice to meet you. I'm Chase Dream's manager.
Yeah, no, we met last week. We had a full meal together.
Oh, gay brother and girl sister, right? Oh, you guys aren't getting married, are you? Because that would be bad optics for this guy right here. Although love is love is love is love, as Linda Manuel once said.
It's Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Who's Linda Manuel then? And why do I represent her?
TBTL. She's buying, right? Because I will be ordering a bowl of soup as an appetizer, not a cup. Chuck, I know people say I'll fill up, but you have no idea how my body processes soup.
I love pickles. It's my heritage. I love a pickle.
It's embarrassing and it's gross, but at least it's kind of funny.
There you have it. A practical example of modern communication.
How'd it go?
Well, he's gonna acknowledge me on Instagram, so I guess you could say it was one of the best conversations of my entire life.
You know, it's just living truthfully in imaginary circumstances.
So if you're out there, come find me.
All right, hello, good morning, and welcome everyone to a Tuesday edition of TBTL, the show that just might be too beautiful to live.
Is it too early to get a fish sandwich?
My name's Luke Burbank. I'm your host.
Oh my God, he made it!
Coming to you from the Madrona Hill studio, perched high above the mighty Columbia, where it's an absolutely beautiful day, nestled in the early part of a beautiful week of weather. It's going to be sunshine, blue skies.
I like to be tan. It just feels good.
I stayed up late last night trying to see the Aurora Borealis. There was a very small chance that it might make its way all the way down here to southern Washington. I did not see it, but it was a beautiful night. Nonetheless, we got a beautiful show in store for you today. It's episode 4,480 in a collector series.
Let the fun begin.
If you can believe that. Of course, one of the best-known podcasters out there in the world is Marc Maron, who has the WTF podcast.
Yeah, everyone's got a podcast.
And now he has announced that he is winding it down. He is voluntarily stepping away from the podcast microphone. It's big news in the podcast world. We'll talk about that. Also, when I wasn't looking out the window for the Aurora Borealis late last night, I was watching the Pee Wee Herman as himself documentary on HBO.
You don't want to get mixed up with a guy like me. I'm a loner, Daddy. A rebel.
Interesting stuff. I was not like one of those folks who was all that obsessed with the Pee Wee's Playhouse TV show, but I certainly loved the movie, and I learned a lot about Paul Reubens in the doc. We'll talk about that. Also, speaking of sort of documentaries, Andrew saw the Pavement movie about the band Pavement, so maybe we'll compare notes on all of that. Speaking of my good friend, Dr. Andrew Walsh, the longest-running co-bro of the show, maybe best known for his depictions of the tall ships. Sometimes, just as a sort of a sign of friendship, I'll call him
Boom Boom
Off Air. That's my little off-air nickname for him. And he is, by the way, joining us right now. Good morning, my friend.
Good morning. I'm sorry if you heard extraneous noise or the sound of me mimicking you or anything during your intro. I realized at the last minute that my microphone has been open this whole time.
I didn't hear anything.
You didn't hear, like, when you were doing, like, it's nice outside the window. I'm like, it's nice outside the window. And I do this thing, usually my mic is muted, but I just sort of, like, kind of just very just toxically sort of imitating you over
me
here. Yeah, just to myself. It's the way I can get through it.
Yeah, no, I didn't hear any of that, but I'm sure the listeners will pick up on it.
Sorry.
That I heard. That one I definitely...
I could see that being a bit that's funny for about 5 seconds until it really turns. I feel like at the 6-second moment, that becomes a real problem on the show.
Well, it reminds me of something I think we might have tried this years and years and years ago when I worked on this public radio satire program called Rewind. I think we might have tried some kind of a joke where we did basically a radio crawl. So you know how when you're watching CNN or any of those news channels, there's the crawl, there's the other information visually that's going along the screen. And I think, and this was right about when that started. This would have been, I don't know, a little bit post 9/11, but the sort of 24-hour news cycle was very much in bloom at this point, and the crawl felt kind of new. And so we tried to do one where it's like Bill was talking and then somebody else was just whispering things. Different things than what Bill was saying. And I think we did it one time, and the management said, please never do that again. It's causing people to drive off the road.
Well, I don't know that this is something that you would put on television today, but I immediately think of it must have been the 1970s SNL bit where they had Garrett Morris provide audio for the hearing impaired. And I think it was during Weekend Update, and basically just had Garrett Morris just yelling his head off, just screaming what the people had said just prior to him. Yes.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
I mean, not watching it in real time, but I remember
we would have been
seeing that in the culture. Hey, Andrew, by the way, speaking of things in the culture, we would like the TBTL 10s to help us with a project that I can't get into all of the details on because this project is still in development for us. But what we would like to try to accumulate is a list of people's favorite TBTL moments.
Yes.
And again, for something that we're going to be doing that you'll hear more about as we get closer to the reveal, as it were. But for right now, what we would really like is if you could email us. And I forgot to ask who is being emailed.
I think we're
Is it all
emailing
three of
these
us?
to John. I think he's going to kind of coordinate this. So if you could,
TBTL employee numero uno. John
exactly, and John is spelled with no H. It's JON at tbtl.net. Just let him know what your favorite TBTL moment is. If you happen to know an episode number or date, that would be awesome. I would assume most people don't, but we just wanted to try to. I have something. Do I have audio going on over here? What's going on there? Did you? Is
that me or is that you?
No, I think it was me.
If you also have a small voice inside your computer that nags you while you talk, that's a real.
Something must have happened to the setup of my computer where it just went into Ron Funches from yesterday. This is supposed to stop at the end of a track. Listen, we got to get back to this announcement that we're making here.
This could be a show ruiner.
But no, I'll look into it. Let me just tell you a little story, though, because this is a story that can't wait because it is so boring.
We don't want to close the loop on the call for submissions.
I'm going to come back to that because I have so much more to say on that. But I think we're in okay shape. I just misfired something. But I don't have iTunes on my computer anymore. iTunes doesn't exist. But as an Apple user, your interface basically still looks sort of like what I think of as iTunes from back in the day. But as a PC user, I don't have that anymore. But that's still what I use to fire most of my audio. So instead, I have this open source audio player called MusicBee, and it's one of those things that's free. Again, it's open source, which means people can kind of add to it or whatever. It has so many options and functionalities that you don't even want to mess with it because you have to crawl so deep into the system to figure out how do I make it stop at the end of a track or whatever. So when I thought that it was just rolling through my entire catalog, I was like, this is going to take me a week to figure out. But it looks like we're okay.
Well, imagine me at the Apple store on Sunday trying to explain to the guy why it is that I need to get all of the audio out of my, whatever you call it, Apple Music, and he was like, so is it music that you have, is it music that you bought from Apple because that's going to be in the cloud? I'm like, no, it's like 1 second pieces of audio like this.
Right.
It's like my whole job relies on me being able to migrate this information to my new computer.
Microwave.
And he had questions about that? That wasn't straightforward. It's like,
He
you
just
want the
slowly backed
microwave.
away,
You want the
handed me to another genius.
microwave over there. But anyway, sorry to distract there. But so first of all, let's just get down to the details again. You can email your favorite TBTL moments to John at tbtl.net. I know it was a question in the 10 of the week form for a long, long time, like what's your favorite TBTL moment? And so you might even have one that's sort of front of mind. But we wanted to sort of see if we could get kind of a collection of people's favorite TBTL moments in front of us.
Again, this is for a specific project we're working on. So just so you know, I don't know. We probably should have thought of some incentive, right?
I think the incentive is just helping this podcast be the best podcast it can be, really, I think.
I mean, these listeners, and the thing is, it's time these listeners finally step up, Andrew, and do something for this show.
That's right. What do the Car Talk guys always say? Write it on the back of a rookie card of, I don't know, name a famous sports player, Luke. Do you remember that the Car Talk guys would always sort of say, send in your suggestions, but then but write it on the back of something very, very expensive, and then
I didn't ever pick that up.
It was,
I never, I didn't, well, you didn't grow up with Car Talk either, but I didn't really grow up with it. And it was one of those things that I knew was very, very, it was, when I got into public radio, it was still very big in the world of public radio, but it was kind of on fumes. I think one of the Magliazzi brothers was having health issues, and it was, I think, but it was still a pretty big deal. But it was one of those ones that I kind of listened to, and I found it mildly amusing, but it didn't quite hit for me. I think it's the kind of thing that if you, like, for instance, Becca grew up with, driving around on Saturdays in the Volvo, which I believe they called Black Betty, and there would be, OPB playing, and they'd be listening to the Tappet Brothers, and it's very associated with childhood and your parents and things like that. I didn't have that kind of bonding experience with it.
Yeah, I didn't know about it until college, so I guess I was older then, but relative to where I am now in life, I seem like a kid and so young. And I actually do have, even though it was later in life for me than driving around in a family car, I do associate it with like bonding. I remember me and my dad kind of fell in love with it at the same time. I kind of got into public radio. I started working in public radio. Then I told my dad, it was like, I remember coming home from college one weekend and spending the weekend with my parents, and they had these like just so much decks on the back of it, like wooden deckage, like 2 layers of decks on the back of this suburban house they had. And I spent a whole weekend at their house, like waterproofing that and staining it with my dad. And we would just dial in like the entire Saturday morning. It was like, what do you know with Michael Feldman?
Sure.
2 hours of that stuff. You had Prairie Home, which was like 2 hours. You had
Love it.
Car Talk. I think This American Life, although that was a little bit harder to kind of chat over, but like those types of weekend programming, I just have very, very fond memories. In fact, my dad sent me a photo yesterday. He must have been going through old stuff. He found the station I worked for back in the day was called WKSU, and he just found an actual member card. He was a WKSU member that expired in the year 2000. He said, "Ooh, I'm behind on my dues. We should give out member cards."
I say that I didn't grow up in a public radio household, because I kind of didn't, but I do remember for some reason our whole family gathering around and listening to the Prairie Home Companion joke show.
Oh yeah,
they used to have one episode. One episode a year that was just rapid fire jokes, and like you said, there was knock knock jokes. There was, a bunch of different kind of genres of jokes, but it was just all jokes the whole show. And I have this specific memory of like it being in the kitchen of our little rental house on 77th, and like listening to it with my parents and like laughing and thinking this is really good. So there must have been a little bit of public radio that was making its way into the home environment, but it was not so much car talk focused. Speaking of broadcast legacies, Andrew, let's talk about this Marc Maron thing. I was quite shocked yesterday to see a post from Mark saying that he and Brendan, who's been his longtime producer of the WTF podcast, that they have decided that they're going to wind it down. They're going to stop doing the WTF show. I think he said probably sometime in like August is when it'll kind of officially end, but they'll be doing shows until then. They probably got some in the can. But this had me feeling a whole kind of way because as I texted this to you yesterday, first of all, I texted Maron. I said, phenomenal run. He said, thank you very much. That's good. I'm getting responses from him again. There was
good,
a period of time where I was not
for him too.
There was a period of time I wasn't getting, but it was actually very sad, Andrew, because let's see, I'll do this. Why not? I sent him, I said, hey, it's Luke Burbank. I remember you sitting in my house doing my podcast, thinking about starting your own podcast. Congrats on a phenomenal run. He said, thanks a lot, man. Like the previous message was me trying to get him on Livewire. And then the previous message to that is me trying to get him on Livewire.
And were there any responses to those, and how far back do they go?
One is from 2019, and the other is from 2017. Hey, it's Luke Burbank from Seattle, Portland, NPR Radio. By the way, lying. We're never on NPR, but sometimes I just feel like it sounds better. Like just watched, I don't know, something about Lynn Shelton, who was alive at the time, who was his partner, and trying to get him to do PR for some kind of a book thing. He did put me in touch with the person that was doing the PR for the book. But basically, like, there's some of these kind of well-known people that I had a very, very casual sort of knowing of, association with, and then I hit them up so many times to try to get them on various productions that then they just stopped responding. So I'm glad, I was tempted to say, hey, do you want to jump on TVTL to talk about it? But I didn't. I literally, because I was like, well, we're talking again. But I was like, no, this can't be where every time he gets a message from me, it's me trying to weasel him onto one of my shows. So,
especially, I mean, I'm glad that he responded because it's kind of, we were talking about this with birthday messages the other day. Like, I don't, you can text somebody on their birthday, but like, don't expect a response because that's the day they're hearing from everybody in their life, people they worked with 10 years ago or whatever.
He's probably getting a text from Obama.
Exactly, like no shit, like honestly. So.
I mean, and that's the thing about that. So the reason that this more than other podcasts that I can think of really kind of hits me is because, we had Maron on. We used to have him on TBTL kind of semi-regularly. I mean, I think he was on our LA show, our live show we did at the Troubadour. He was in. Were you there when he was in my house?
Nope.
Were we doing the show together?
I don't think I've ever met him.
But he was, over at my house when the show was being held up by a stick, and because he was kind of in this, and I think he would say this too. So it's not. I'm not talking out of school, but he was sort of in a bit of a career, like he wasn't sure where his career was going. He had done Air America Radio, that had kind of folded, and then it was kind of like he was doing stand up, but he was kind of looking for his next thing. And this very nascent broadcast format of podcasting was going on. And I remember he was doing TBTL, and he said, yeah, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. And then I remember he had called up Jesse Thorne from The Sound of Young America, now Bullseye. And I think Jesse had gone over to his house to like help him set up his mics, and then we would have him on TBTL. I remember one time he told me he was really excited because he was getting free coffee. This is Maron. He was like, yeah, they're giving me free. Somebody's just mailing me coffee. By the way, shout out to Broadcast Coffee. We've 17 years in, we finally achieved what Marc Maron was doing 1 month in.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, I remember thinking kind of like, oh, they're there. Because we were getting like, at that point, we were actually getting some ad money from Chateau Saint Michel and who knows, some other entities and stuff. So I felt like, boy, things are kind of cooking for TBTL. And Maron is this guy who's much more well known than us, but he's working for Coffee Beans. And then 6 months later, it's like the cover of the New York Times entertainment section. The greatest podcast of all time is the WTF podcast with Marc Maron. And so I've always just had, and I've been a listener to the show for years, kind of off and on. But I guess this is why I'm feeling particularly something about this today. It's because we have now observed the entire life cycle of someone else's podcast that is a hit podcast.
Well, I mean, the number one podcast in America at times, right?
Yes. Yeah. And maybe still, I don't know. I don't check those. Ever since we fell out of the top 100, I've stopped checking the rankings.
But I mean, if you were to just stop somebody in the street and say, name a podcast, I actually don't want to play this game because I couldn't think of a famous sports player before. But I don't even know if you call them sports players. Now that I
Andrew, I have some sports player cards.
But if you,
I'd like to trade with you later.
What floats to the top? Rogan, and then people will still cite Serial because it was sort of like it's what kind of made podcasting mainstream in some ways. There are ones that are been around a lot longer and successful, like my Scott Aukerman podcast network Comedy Bang Bang and all of those. But like honestly, if you just stop something like Maron is going to be the top of the list, yet it's funny for you to kind of recount these stories because back when, and I remember, I think you and I knew each other around this time. Like I was vaguely aware of like you having Maron on the show, or almost like Maron being in a position. You wouldn't say this, but in a certain way, relying on you more than you were relying on him at that stage,
at that moment.
But this is a man that I knew from being literally a child and seeing him on 2 Drink Minimum and like Dr.
standing in front of various brick walls.
Yes, and Dr. Katz and like all these these kind of alt comedy things from the 90s before we called it alt comedy, and it's kind of like, oh, he's going to start a podcast, but it was like, well, you've already reached the heights of fame. You've been on Squiggle Vision, like you've been on Dr. Katz. Like
I'm still waiting for that call.
What are you going to do after that?
Right. But just to watch this thing go from an idea in this guy's head that he's casually talking about with me off air to it gets started to it becomes like a massive cultural thing. Like, again, you've got Barack Obama going on. I mean, pretty much anybody who was out doing a tour, a press tour of any kind, if they could get on WTF, they would. It was, I mean, it reaches so many people. I mean, it's such a runaway hit. And then to watch it just kind of like flourish and then eventually for him to be like, yeah, okay, and by the way, he is so going out on his own terms. This is not because they're struggling to figure out, how to make the finances work. This is just because, as he said in his message,
the finances worked, and now he can retire.
Well, there's that. I mean, the other thing too that's part of it is that I think because of I think a couple of things kind of happened sort of concurrently, but I think somewhat related, which was this podcast really took off for him, and then the rest of his career kind of re-energized. Suddenly he's acting in a lot of things. I mean, Mark's actually a really good actor, and he starts, getting cast in like that TV show Glow, and he's in a bunch of movies, and like he starts, it's just his acting career really kind of took off. And so I think that this is basically like he no longer needs to be doing a podcast 2 days a week, for his professional life, because the rest of his professional life is thriving so much. And so he's moving on from this. But again, because everything ultimately relates back to us, Andrew, this idea that we watch this thing get born, live a full, rich life, and now it's going to cross that rainbow bridge, and we're still here doing this shit. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't understand any of that. I don't understand how we're still doing this. At some point, we may become the longest running podcast in world history.
We do have to knock Ackerman off of that, right? I think you guys both.
Well, how about 5 days a week?
Well, certainly number-wise, we have that.
Because that was the thing. Yeah. Maron was like, "We've been doing this Tuesday and Thursday for 17 years," and I was like, "Talk to me when you're doing it Monday through Friday."
I will say, and I mean, in defense of that, and you know this because you used to book people for TBTL. It is easier to do a daily podcast when you don't have to book somebody every day,
or talk about interesting things,
or talk about anything that or care about the audience's experience. Right. Honestly, I'm going to say something here that sounds a little bit catty, and this is the wrong time to bring this up because I'm really not trying to gloat here, but. As you were talking about Maron and how he's acting more, it reminded me that he did have maybe the first TV show that was based on his podcast. Remember, his podcast got really famous. Oh, yeah. And then he got a TV show called Maron on IFC.
Yeah, I actually thought that was pretty good.
I never saw it, but I was thinking about it because I was going through some audio before the show, and I realized a bunch of it is it's not actually Maron talking. It's just drops I took from that TV show because it was about a podcast. And it's like, I remember, you would talk about how kind of some relatively close brushes to having some interest in creating maybe a TBTL TV show back when there was a little bit more fire in that direction. And I'm thinking about, this is going to be so rude to people that we've known and worked with, but like maybe that Maron show was good on IFC, but I don't think it lasted very long. And it's kind of like, there is a problem with trying to make a TV show about podcasts. I just don't think it works. Like, unless somebody wants to make one about us, in which case I think it's a great idea,
yes,
and you should get
absolutely.
at me. But it's kind of like you had that one, and then remember the Gimlet one. Remember they got the guy from Scrubs. I should know his name, and I'm blanking on it. The
Zach Braff.
Zach Braff,
where he basically plays Alex.
Yeah, Zach Braff played. Alex Bloomberg for like the Gimlet show, and then of course, I mean, who could forget? That's right, the show is called Startup, and who could forget? God Liked Me, or what was that one?
Oh yeah, my podcast is on life support.
Yeah, God, I have drops from that as well.
Podcast?
It was about a kid who was the son of a preacher who was trying to start a podcast. God saved my podcaster.
Here comes me. It's millennial podcaster.
Actually, that's from like a Dateline NBC, but it's like
God friended.
How's it all going? You asking me about my podcast? Yes. Still trying to figure it out.
So that was the show where a guy has a direct line to God, and he also has a podcast.
And he's starting a podcast. I think he's the son of a preacher. Here's what I think I know about the show. He's the son of a preacher of some sort. I don't know. Preacher, I'm not sure. And then he, though, starts to question his own faith. The son does. And so he starts a podcast about maybe atheism, or to sort of maybe about faith and an exploration of figuring out if he should believe in God or not. But then in doing so, he believes he becomes friends with God on Facebook, I think. And that's why it's called God Friended Me.
Well, I think you and I are in a mood around all this today, because this is coming at the same time that our old pals at APM, our friends from the Brains On and Smash Boom Best and that universe, that show seems like it's in a bit of flux, because APM is not going to be running it anymore. They're looking to sell the show, and we're hoping that everybody gets rehired in whatever new version of that show that comes around. But like, I think when you're talking about trying to make TV shows out of podcasts or whatever, I think we felt like there was a period of time at APM, American Public Media, this is where we used to work, for any new listeners we just picked up today, where they were trying to kind of run it like a TV studio or something. And like this, I think what sounds like what I'm hearing you say, Andrew, is like, leave the podcasting to us ugly people and let us just operate in relative anonymity. Don't try to make TV shows about us, and also don't try to make it into a TV show. Just let us be in our mom's basement doing this thing we've been doing for 17 years.
Yeah, or I just think that there's something like, I don't know, WKRP in Cincinnati is a great show. It's a classic show. It was about radio. Like somehow that worked. For some reason, like trying to like, just like podcasting became such a buzzword for so long before it just settled into just another technology. You know what I mean? We don't get excited about streaming services. Nobody's making TV shows about starting a new streaming service. You know what I mean? It's just a new technology that has sort of like kind of shifted the way we consume our media. And I've always seen podcasting as that way as well. And I'm not saying that there aren't like interesting podcasts or that we need to like kind of stay in our parents' basements or whatever. We can be loud and we can be proud as podcasters, Luke, but like I let your podcast flag fly, I say. But like this idea of everybody just somehow like something happened and like, I want to be careful about the way I talk about our time at APM too, but like what we're seeing today is not just the sad news about, kind of this situation that's in flux with Brains On and all of our old colleagues there who, many of whom I hold dear and I'm worried about. But we're basically seeing the end of the podcast network that hired us way back in 2015. Back then, it was called Infinite Guest. It went through many,
and as I mentioned to you before the show, turns out it is finite.
Turns out it was finite guest. And, eventually settled into something called APM Studios, which I think makes much more branding sense, certainly. But during our time there, we just saw it going from, hey, we're trying to like kind of put our... we're a radio company, essentially, a media company, but we know that podcasting is kind of where people are turning for their content. So we want to kind of like put our arms around that a little bit. Like that makes total sense. Start a little network, right? But then as the more we were there, we just sort of saw the creative, a lot of the original creatives kind of leave and more just like TV executives come in, and then the TV executives wanted to hire their TV executives, and the TV executives wanted to hire their like.
Do you mean when they were going to the podcasting upfronts?
And going to the upfronts and
strategically a mistake, Andrew?
I mean, I maybe they're still doing well with the upfronts. I don't know, but it just became like this. Everybody just got dollar signs in their eyes and just saw the word podcasting for some reason became in their head and wrongfully synonymous with just like the next new gold rush sort of. And obviously that wasn't sustainable. And it really does bum me out about decisions that were made along the way when people didn't sort of realize, like, people weren't like, oh, there's a new morning radio show on Cairo. Like, that's exciting for a local market when that happens. You look for some new advertising, you get some marketing around that. But there was something that happened. People, I'm going to say it, Luke, people lost their goddamn minds over podcasting. You know what I mean? And like, and I think that led to a lot of good people eventually being hung out to dry because of a sort of a bloated approach to like what the idea of a network was. And it really bums me out. And today, aside from the Maron thing, which I have zero connection to, and you have a wistful kind of recollection of, like, today we are seeing essentially, and I have no insider information about this, by the way. I want to make that very clear. Just based on the two short articles I read about it, sounds like APM Studios no longer exists. It's now just going to be under American Public Media again, and it's going to be two podcasts. One is The Splendid Table, which is a radio show. It's a radio show that's also a podcast. That's how I started listening to TBTL. Like, no shame there. TBTL was the radio show that had a podcast, and that's how I listened to it. But like, it's that and The Slowdown, which is a great podcast, that's centered around poetry that I love, but I believe that is a special project that is probably grant funded, and that's it. And now they're just APM now, and basically I just remember
they're getting
the
out of the
feelings.
original podcast game. In other words, they'll take stuff that exists on the radio. There'll be plenty of like marketplace things that they then play as a podcast and offer as a podcast. But as far as like making original stuff that is only exists as a podcast, that seems like those days are kind of over.
And the whole structure internally of just like having, who do you work for? I work for APM Studios. It just doesn't exist, I don't think, or will exist anymore. And so anyway, it's just sort of a wistful day for me too when I think about all of that, when I think back to 2015 and where you and I were. I will say this, though, it's a wistful day as I think about this stuff broadly, but I think the obvious thing here, maybe even as we get close to thanking our dazzling donors for the day, it makes me so thankful for where we are and the listeners who have stuck with us.
I mean, that's the thing, and not to sprain my arm patting us on the back. Really, I should be patting the listeners on the back, although some of the listeners have asked me to stop patting them on the back.
Yeah,
so
because it became kind of circular rubs. And
I'll get consent next time at a fan meetup as far as what the back patting situation is. But like, yeah, I keep going back to this, but like when I was buying this, I was getting a new computer this weekend because my old one bit the dust, and I was, there was no way for me to not mention to the person who was selling me the computer that I do a podcast, because there's just no way to get into what my needs were for it. I would rather generally, this is also why you could say the growth of TBTL may have plateaued, because you and I would rather die than tell someone in public that we're doing a podcast. But it was unavoidable in this case. And then you get into explaining like how long we've been doing it. And I said, I think we've been doing it for like 17 years. He goes, was that like before podcasting even existed? I go, pretty close, pretty close to it. But like, when you look around and you see so many talented people who are kind of struggling to figure out how to make the finances of this stuff work, the fact that we're just here still doing it, and it is actually, it kind of maths out for now anyway. Of course, this is because of the donors.
Yeah,
it's crazy to me. And like I was sort of joking, but not joking. Like there, as far as I can tell, I think there will be a point at which we have done more daily podcasts probably than anybody in the history of the world, don't you think? Like as far as something that's not a radio show, that's being, in other words, Monday through Friday doing an original show that only exists digitally. I feel like we have to. I don't know of anybody else who's been doing this. There was that Keith and the Girl thing.
That's the only one I'm thinking about. That's still going, right? There is some.
I think
other
so.
show
Every time we have this conversation,
show,
I go to their website and I see that they're still doing it. But I don't know if they do 5 days a week. I mean, there are podcasts that do 5 days a week now, but I don't know if there's any podcasts that have been doing 5 days a week since like 2000. Even if we say that this didn't really start until we got fired from Cairo and we're doing it from my house. But even if you go, that's like 2009 or something. It's like, it's a long time ago.
Well, I can tell you, they are on, Keith and the Girl is on episode 3,915, and we are on 4,000. We're getting close to 5,000 now, right?
Yeah.
They're getting close to 4,000. We're getting close to 5,000.
I mean, that would be pretty crazy if at some point it's verified or it can be sort of proven that we are. I wonder, should we reach out to Guinness? Should we try to get? Would that be a good promotional opportunity for the show?
Kind of
the longest running daily podcast, the Guinness Book of World Records longest running 5 day a week podcast.
God, remember we read that was it a Texas Monthly piece or something? A really interesting deep dive on how the Guinness book works, and that guy who goes around and he kind of like he seemed
the
like
verification
a really
is pretty intense.
It's intense, but also I remember really liking the verifying guy. That actually is not the worst idea in the world. Also, when you consider all the bonus stuff we did too. Like the Game of Thrones recaps and all the sports recaps, those aren't even included in our numbering system. Like the files that we have in our system go up to probably over 6,000 now, I would guess.
I mean, childhood dream unlocked for me if we got in the Guinness Book of World Records.
I know
that was my main read. That also, and Archie Double Digest were my main reading materials.
You know what?
For a certain period of
I'm
life.
going to stop clipping my nails right now too, just as a backup
good.
plan.
Yes, excellent. You're already into photography, which is good because I believe the guy who had the world's longest nails when I was a kid, the whole thing on him was he was also a photographer.
Oh, and how did he click the shutter?
Well, that was the big question. I remember, and I feel like he had to keep his super long fingernails in some kind of a velvet kind of sleeve that he would pull over them because otherwise they'd get caught on everything.
Oh, you know what I learned, by the way? I have a new phone now, Luke. I think I told you that. I'm pretty proud. We're getting along pretty well. But and this just goes to show you, and this gives us hope too in our friendship and relationship. In the waning days of my old phone, for another upcoming TBTL project that we can tell people about later, related to the Thon, you and I had to take in our own respective studios had to take some photos of ourselves, right? And usually, if I was going to take a photo of myself, I would set up my phone and put it on a little timer, right? You could hit the shutter and then step back and like wait 5 seconds and then pose, and classic shutter timer stuff. But as I was like doing this, I knew that I was going to have to do a whole bunch of takes, and I realized my phone did something. And this is in the last like probably couple of weeks of me owning this thing that I'd had for years and years. I realized there was a voice command. This was such a game changer. Do you know this about your phone, or does your phone have this? If you are doing a photo shoot by yourself, there's some voice command. I don't know what it is, and I don't want to make other people's phones start taking photos, but let's just say it was like, okay, shoot now. And I was just like, okay, shoot now. And I changed position. Okay, what? Shoot now. Okay, shoot. Whatever the trigger word was. Yes. And I was just like, I was able to like just stand there and I just kind of kept, and then I could walk over, see how it looks or whatever. But it was so amazing.
That makes so much sense.
Oh, Luke, it was a game changer, my boy.
My boudoir photos are going to really level up with this.
Yes,
got my feather boa. I've got my soft lighting, and now I've got my voice command.
Yeah, because I like, and I'm going to be honest with you, I really like your boudoir photos, but you could always see that they were selfies. Your one arm was always
or I'm kind of have like a weird. I didn't know the camera was going to go off. I'm kind of caught a little bit by surprise.
Yes, exactly. Which there's a sexiness to that too.
There is. I consider them candids, but this is a game changer.
We was hoping for some razzle-dazzle.
Razzle-dazzle.
That's right, man. Razzle-dazzle.
On your mark. On your mark. Get set.
Get set.
Now ready.
Ready. Go.
Everybody razzle-dazzle.
All right. Speaking of TBTL's truly unique business model, which has somehow allowed us to do this for all these years and episodes, we got to thank some of those dazzling donors. These folks are voluntarily donating a dazzling amount of dough each month. And that's how this all works. This is 100% listener-supported podcasting. Thanks to folks like Johnny Calcagno.
Johnny.
Wait.
Long-time ride or die.
Wait, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania?
Did we know about this and forget? Oh, goldfish.
No, possibly, but no.
Okay.
We know this family well. It's Johnny, Karen, and Riley of the music making. I know these folks lived in Seattle because I for a period of time, I knew where Riley went to school. And also I remember them being behind my car once in the morning when I think I was driving into Cairo, and I looked in my rearview mirror and there was the Calcagno family.
And they visited us in your old studio, of course.
Exactly. So this Philadelphia thing seems like a big development.
It does.
Is this what's happening? Are we all moving to Philadelphia, Andrew?
I think so. It does sort of seem like it is drawing us.
It's a beautiful city. It's got great people. I think it's got a reasonable cost of living. This could be where eventually all things TBTL end up locating. Johnny says, in addition to being a relaxing and funny alternative to the terrible news of the world, Luke and Andrew do a great job of being on the right side of issues dear to our hearts. Some highlights. Our vegan and vegetarian family loves Luke's compassion for animals, even as he talks about the complexity of the issue for many people. We also so appreciate Andrew's support of Seattle's unhoused community and his annoyance with some of the NIMBY spirit, all too present in the city. Both Luke and Andrew channel our trauma about the current political crisis in America, as well as our desire to not wallow in it full time. Thank you, dummies. I want to mention, Andrew, that because of this new computer that I got, seems like it shouldn't be related to the hardware of the computer, but I guess I'm on a newer operating system. This is my smaller portable computer that I take to places when I'm doing the show from the road. The email function on that has some sort of, it's preset with basically an AI summary of the email. And I don't know how to turn it off yet, so it's just on there. And I sent this to you yesterday. I had the summary of Johnny's message was basically Luke loves animals, Andrew stands up for unhoused people, and then it was a reference to our next dazzling donor, something about them and beer. And I think you said, this checks out.
I don't have it in front of me right now. I was going to try to read it, but also for a very hot minute, Google switched over to creating at the very tops of emails these summaries of the email, which was so annoying. Because, I read a lot of newsletters, and I received my own newsletter, and then it summarized it. And, of course, the newsletter's all over the place. It has a 10 of the week. It has music suggestions. And there is no coherent full theme throughout the whole newsletter that is, broken down into segments. But AI will never stop trying to I'm getting so irritated with everything. I'm not saying that as a tool it doesn't help some functions, but they're trying so desperately I have this new phone, and every single thing I do, it's like, well, don't you want AI to do that? AI can help with that. I'm just like, I don't need to help with this. You're just trying, and it's just so annoying, although it is comical to see my newsletters try to be summarized by AI.
Yeah, I think I'm going to turn it off. I don't know. I mean, it's also like, does it really save me that much time versus just clicking on the email to see what the content of the email is?
Scan.
Yeah. Johnny says 2024 was a year of personal losses for us, but we're working to stay positive. Riley and music partner Viv toured nearly nonstop, but made time for their new role as artistic directors of Port Townsend's Fiddle Tunes Festival. Heck yeah.
Nice.
Riley and Viv, by the way, making great music.
Yeah.
We've played it on the show before. In April, they'll travel to England to record with Big Thief producer Dom Monks. What?
Nice. Big Thief I just saw coming out with a new double disc this week.
I feel like I want to live inside of a Big Thief song, although emotionally I don't know if I could sustain it.
Yeah.
There is just there's something about that music, particularly the music of Adrian Lenker, but I'll loop the whole band in there and just say that it's it just does something to me, which is a good thing because I'm feeling my feelings in a really intense way when I listen, but then sometimes it's almost like too much. So that'd be my advice to Viv and Riley when you're working with a Big Thief producer is get the music to an emotional level where people will feel intensely, but not so much that we're just walking around sobbing in Longview, Washington. It's not a good look.
Like a bike horn every now and then, right? You just
That's it. Just something fun.
Just in the middle of a song.
Like a squirrel.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a little squirrel, what do they call this anyway? Call.
Keep us grounded.
Yeah. Anyway, Johnny and the Calcagno family, thank you so much for all your years of support and being part of the show. We really, really do appreciate you. Maestro.
On your mark. Get set.
Get set.
Now ready.
Ready. Go.
Everybody rattle.
Hey, look who it is. It's Ryan Driscoll in Nampa, Idaho.
Nice. Hi, Ryan.
What up, Ryan? Ryan says, so happy to dazzle TBTL another year. As my business, Pre-Funk Beer Bar, is the source of the dazzling dough, I have a little plug. I wrote something 6 years ago when we were in the midst of a podcast boom.
Hey.
Hey, that's kind of interesting. It feels like all the conversation already on the show today kind of leads up to this. I wrote a little something 6 years ago for our local NPR affiliate that they politely declined. I spent way too much time on it not to do something with it. So would one of you read this ad in your best NPR underwriter voice? The references are dated, but if you've spent as much time with Roman Mars as I have, it will make total sense. Thank you, TBTL, for everything. What you do is so important. So let me see if I'm understanding this. Ryan, who's got Pre-Funk Beer Bar there in Nampa, Idaho, I guess was writing this as an underwriting message that was going to be read on the local public radio station, and they turned it down?
Looking ahead, I think I understand why.
I guess because it does name check a bunch of
a lot of references to
names and products. It's kind of a meta joke about public radio and also podcast underwriting, I guess.
Also, I'm interested. I don't know if NPR has changed the rules about this. I don't listen to as much NPR these days, but there was a time where the voiceover, whoever's reading it, whether it's like kind of a unnamed voiceover person or an actual host read, they used to not say it in first person. So I'm not in this one. It says it says we support public radio or whatever. I think you'd have to say they support public radio, right? Is that still the thing? You couldn't say
right. Yeah, you can't say
comes
we.
From Jiffy Lube. We believe your car should be lubed. Is that still what they're saying?
Yes, that is.
That's such a weird catchphrase. I think it would be they believe your car should be lubed.
I'm trying to find AI voice generator. I'm trying to see if public radio voice. If public radio voice is a thing that I could find somewhere to put this together for Ryan. Or, do you want to take a shot at this? Do you want me to?
I'm happy to. Let me give it a shot. It's kind of a cold read here. So so we've already read everything up until this. So what Ryan wants us to do is to do an ad read on this. Okay, yes. So I'm just sort of reading.
But real public radio, real public, and all the way down to, I think, just starting with @ Pre-Funk, and I think all the way down to the end of the text is the thing.
Okay, all the way down. I'm going to try that. I'm kind of reading this cold, by the way, so I have to kind of figure it out. Okay, so. And I need to get into it by saying support from TBTL comes from, or support from
Oh, did you
NPR
know that
comes
they're considering, this will put you in a public radio mood, CBS might want me to do a profile of Larry Mantle, who's about to be on his 40th anniversary.
No, that's really interesting because I love that idea. I'm a little surprised. Do people outside of the LA market know Larry Mantle? This is your opportunity to introduce them, maybe.
Well, that's what I'm hoping. It would be, if it happens, it'd be produced by my friend Jay Kernis, who is a longtime public radio person who now works at CBS Sunday Morning. And so I'm only mentioning that to kind of put you in a sort of a KPCC,
Oh, you mean LAist?
LA. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's easier to remember a public radio station if it's called LAist.
Oh, definitely. No,
Just
I mean,
another example of
and
hiring
I think the
all
numbers
right
really
people.
reflect that.
Yeah,
probably.
exactly.
Dear God. Well, you know what I have to say about that.
Okay, Libby.
No, but I'm trying to put you in like a Michael Silverblatt kind of a like.
Oh, well, that's a different voice altogether. We're not.
Yeah.
Gonna do
Okay.
that.
Well,
Okay.
you choose. You choose whichever one you want.
Okay. Support for TBTL comes from Pre-Funk Brewing. At Pre-Funk, we support everything public radio. Am I being too chipper? Do I need to like bring it down a bit? Do I need to be more serious?
I like what you're doing with it.
But
actually.
I'm realizing
I think this
I'm trying.
is nice.
Yeah.
This is a good read. Like this would be Ryan actually getting his money's worth. But I do think you might want to dial. I think dial up the boredom, dial down the because you've still got like.
I think I was relying on just making this
brain.
good. I was trying to make it good.
Yeah, that was your mistake. You're actually making it good. It needs to be less good.
Support for TBTL comes from Pre-Funk Brewing. Brewery? I'm making this part up. It's not in the copy. Okay. Support for NPR comes from Pre-Funk Brewing. We support everything public radio. We would take our rocket, mortgage it, and put on our blue apron before someone can make a quip about MeUndies. To make things happen, we need Zip, recruiting our friend Harry's razor-thin cold cuts and Casper mattress to make the party bombus. We also specialize in beer, and when you need to pull an audible, our location in downtown Nampa is perfect if you are in need of a square space.
Nice. Very nice.
Not great. I'm flushing.
No, I thought it was great.
I'm hot. I can't. I don't mean I'm sexy. I mean like I'm blushing.
I think it was really good. I liked how many of the product names were broken up because there was a sentence return.
It's a tough read. Can I get?
It is a tough read.
It's a bit of a tough read. A little bit cold
because
there.
what Ryan is doing is wedging in the millions of things you hear advertised on podcasts and on public radio and turning them into a sentence, but like in a way that's a little non-traditional.
The problem, Luke, is I can't break character now. And this is how
you're trapped.
Oh God, that brings us to Pavements. We got to talk about Pavements at some point. Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, Ryan, thank you very much. Everybody, if you're in Nampa, Idaho, or anywhere near Nampa,
for real,
we call it Nampa Know-How, and
Nampa Know-How.
We would hope. Actually, by the way, Andrew, I just want to tell you. There was a show title.
Oh, I think it might have been yesterday. I almost texted it to you because I thought it was so funny. I thought of it after the fact, and I know I'm smelling my own jokes here, but was it I Bleat for You?
No, but that is also really
I thought
good.
You would like that one.
It's What About Bobble?
Oh, yeah.
That's really
too.
funny.
Yeah.
That is seriously funny. I didn't even realize that till I was looking for something else, and I was like, oh, this is really good. So if you're in Nampa, Idaho, or anywhere near it, head on over to Pre-Funk Beer Bar and say hi to Ryan and tell them that TBTL sent you. And Ryan, thank you so much for the support. We really do appreciate you.
Hello and welcome to Top Story.
Hey, let's talk about this Pavements movie that you went to see. This is when I first heard about it, I thought it was a documentary, but then when I read more into it, it seems like it's kind of an part documentary, part art film, part who knows what. What did you think of this whole thing?
Luke, let me quote one of my favorite artists when I say, it is both. It is both. So I did go see this movie on Sunday because I think it has a very limited release, and so I think it was only playing for a few days in June. So I think I actually got my tickets a while back, and I will say I'm a big Pavement fan. I don't think I would go toe-to-toe with the biggest Pavement fan. In fact, watching this movie sort of highlighted how little I know about the full band, and I just really enjoyed their albums for a really long time. But I had somewhat low expectations going in, and I think that's because I did know that they were both like kind of making a documentary, but also parodying people who make documentaries about themselves, but even more importantly, who make biopics about musicians. It's sort of part of it is a parody of, as you said, the Bob Dylan biopic that came out, or I'm trying to think of some of the Elvis one. I think specifically they take shots at the sort of method of the main actor trying to like really become Steve Malkmus, which is where some of the best humor comes from.
And that's Joe Query, right?
I did not realize
the kid
that
from
until
Stranger Things.
I didn't realize that until later. Now that you say that, of course, I recognize his face. But it's like really funny that there's at one point he's kind of like, maybe I can get he's like with a voice coach, and he's like, maybe I can get a picture of Stephen Malkmus's tongue, and that'll help. He's like just taking it so seriously as he tries to inhabit Stephen Malkmus. And so basically, and I think you set this up on the show before, but it tries to do four things at once. It tells four different storylines at once. One of them is kind of a straightforward documentary of Pavement. Another one is that because this band is, as they describe it, the most influential rock band in America, there is going to be a museum exhibit made for them, kind of a pop-up that celebrates their life and legacy, kind of taking a shot at things like Mo-Pop or like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to a degree, which I've always sort of rolled my eyes at a little bit too, like this idea of like, it's John Lennon's report card. He got a C in English. Like, there's like literally nothing I care less about than John Lennon's report card. What
about a golf club once used by Alice Cooper, though?
What is that a reference to? Is that from?
Well, just the fact that Alice Cooper is known for loving golf.
Okay, yeah,
and it's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I was just trying to think of, because to me, John Lennon's report card would at least, I'd be interested. I feel like there's got to be just some of the. I'm with you, by the way. I don't care about this kind of stuff. I'm just trying to think of what's the worst example of ephemera in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
And I'll continue my description of the movie in a moment, but I'll just say that like Pavement specifically is like, I think, kind of the quintessential Gen X band in a way. Not the most well-known Gen X band, but like they're very eye-rolly. They're very, detractors could sort of say that maybe they think that they're above it all, and maybe they are in a certain way, but they just have this very like, kind of slacker sort of outward vibe sort of. And they've even taken shots at other like kind of bands of their generation famously in some of their songs.
Stone Temple Pilots, they're Elegant Bachelors, they're foxy to me. Are they foxy to you?
Exactly. Smashing Pumpkins, Nature's Kids. But anyway, so going in, that was one of the reasons why I had low expectations. I was like, I love Pavement, but I don't need to see them just like rolling their eyes for 2 hours or whatever it is.
Sure.
But this director was so deft. So let me go back to talking about it. So part of it really is, it just relies on a lot of real old footage that I've never seen before of Pavement throughout the years. It's just really cool. And they don't take it too seriously, but it does tell the story of Pavement in a way. And if you're a fan, you're just like, oh, God, that's so cool to see this again or see it for the first time. Then it's like, oh, there's also going to be this museum piece, which is going to be self-serious, right? And it's going to be like, the shirts that they wore when mud was slinged at them at Lollapalooza or whatever. And like, you can tell, like, it's not real. Like, they've clearly just brought these things in as props, but like they set it up like it's really real, and everybody like kind of treating it very reverence and like your sacred items sort of. But then also it really was a pop-up museum that they created somewhere to grab this footage. And then you do have like modern bands who you see this montage of like Snail Mail, a band that we really like around here, and Soccer Mommy like covering Pavement songs at this pop-up museum, which is like both sarcastic but also like, oh, this is also kind of badass. And then in one part of the movie is that to celebrate the world's most influential band, they're also making a biopic, the kind we just described, like a big Hollywood, like I'm going to inhabit this character and retell the story of this important band in the cheesiest and most like unrealistic way possible. And then the I guess probably the funniest one is, and they're going to make a rock and roll jukebox musical on stage about Pavement songs, which is like kind of a, that's definitely a dig, I would guess, at like Green Day, who literally did that. And just like you can't think of a band that is less appropriate for a jukebox musical than like Pavement. I mean, you could think of
when
things
you say
that
jukebox musical, you mean it's basically a chance to just play the greatest hits of this band, but put it on stage and kind of create some minimal plot around it.
Mamma Mia, Jersey Boys. Yeah, those are
Gotcha,
your classic like jukebox musicals. So you have all these and then you see the making of both of these movies, and you see the making sort of this museum, and then you see all these people interacting with this museum, and they tell all three of these stories at once. And again, one of them is sort of true, which is part of it is a documentary, but then these other things are going on. And I'll be honest with you, the description of this, as I kind of understood it going in, it sounds chaotic and like it's going to be a lot of eye rolling or whatever. It is done so well. It is done. This director, who I was unfamiliar with his work before this, but I kind of want to go back and see, because apparently he has bended genres and stuff before. It's just so well done. I don't know how you can handle all four of those things at once, and how do you divide it up, and how do you and it goes through various split screens at times. And I have an analogy here that might not work. I do think I'm the only person to review this movie, if you consider this a review, to make this comparison, and maybe there's a reason for that, because maybe it's a bad comparison, but I feel like, Luke, it is the Into the Spider-Verse of rock and roll mockumentaries. It is like it's somehow, in a way you really can't describe to somebody who hasn't seen it, they somehow work all of these alternate universes into itself all at the same time, using really interesting but not distracting film techniques. And I loved it because I went in thinking, this will be okay. I'll hang out with my buds who love Pavement, and it'll just be a night. But I honestly left thinking, like, wow, how did they do that? I almost want to see it again. And I had a lot of questions about this band that I've always loved but never really put under a microscope before. It made me want to read reviews of it, and made me want to kind of dig deeper into the history of Pavement. So and it also was, even though it's a band that wants to be so self-deprecating and not be cheesy, they're like trying so hard not to be cheesy by making fun of these other cheesy genres, but somehow you really do leave feeling like it was kind of the perfect celebration of a hell of a legacy. And they don't shy away from that. They don't dwell on it. They don't get gross about it. But you can be a Gen X slack-jawed eye roller like me and still leave the theater feeling like a little bit inspired too. It's really well done. You got to give credit, I think, to the filmmaker for figuring out how to do all of this at once without having it just sort of collapse under its own sarcasm.
Alex Ross Perry is the name of the filmmaker, I believe. And I was just looking him up. I don't recognize anything else that he's done before this. So, yeah, I just realized it's still playing in Portland. I might have to get down there this week and try to catch it before it's gone. The thing with Pavement, I wonder if again, you've watched the film, I haven't. I wonder if Steve Malkmus is at this point, if he's kind of also relaxing a little bit around his kind of eye-rolly persona. I remember when there was that thing I really liked, these La Blagotech takeaway shows, where this was some guy, some like French dude was just kind of, before everybody was having bands play music in unusual places, before there was a Tiny Desk series and stuff, this guy was just like getting bands to kind of play their songs in the back of taxi cabs or in green rooms or wherever. And I think the only person who was ever rude to him was Steve Malkmus, he had said in an interview. And like, meanwhile, I think that Pavement just played, maybe in promotion of this movie or of, I don't know, a tour they might be going on. I think they were on like Colbert or something recently, and they played Harness Your Hopes. And the reason I think this is interesting is because, as far as I understand, Harness Your Hopes was a really kind of not a particularly well-known Pavement song. I didn't know much about it. Now, granted, I'm a pretty I love, Crooked Rain, which is probably their most accessible and easiest record, which would explain why it's the one that I vibed with the most. I know that like Wowie Zowie and Brighten the Corners and Slanted and Enchanted, and the weirder that the record gets, probably the less I'm going to be engaged with it. But my understanding of Harness Your Hopes is TikTok blew it up. Like,
by the way, it was never on a record. Yeah, it was just a B-side. It was like released later on one of those expanded records, but it was never released on an album.
But it was kind of for some reason people started playing it on TikTok and it became huge. And the fact that Steve Malkmus would then agree to play it on like Colbert or something, doesn't that seem like an un-Steve Malkmus move? Like, oh, one of our songs got big on TikTok and now the producers of Colbert are asking us to play our hit song.
Well, it's interesting. I saw Pavement live, I don't know, last winter or something, and they played it and the crowd went pretty crazy for it. So yeah, I don't think he's shying away from that. You're right though, like in this documentary goes back to times where like they have a chance to play like the Tonight Show, I think. And they play their noisiest, loudest shit, the stuff that I loved. Like, literally, the backup the singer just screaming, I'm trying. And just like...
Is that Nesterovich, or who is that?
I can't remember his... I'm really bad at knowing everybody's names, and that I think that is how you say his last name. It has a V in it, I know.
Bob Nastanovich.
Yeah, that's right. That's Bob, yeah. So anyway, so like they did that. Anytime they had an opportunity to get in front of cameras, they did their own thing. They didn't soften it up.
Yeah.
I thought that Malkmus had a quote in this, again, kind of in the regular documentary. I was going to say part. That makes it sound like it's sort of segmented out. But there's a moment where, in earnest, he's talking about that song and how like it's interesting. He's like, I almost feel like I made a huge mistake by not putting. He's like, I love that people are getting into it, but it also is sort of like insulting. Like I picked the wrong songs for the record. I think that was from Bright in the Corners or something. And so but he definitely has mellowed out. Like I think that he's somebody who's not like he's not putting on airs of trying to maintain the super sarcasmo thing. There is one moment also that I think is very earnest. So. Oh, man, I just had his name in my head for a moment. There are two famous comedic actors in this. One is Tim Heidecker, and the other is, go ahead.
In the movie?
In the movie. So, like,
Jason Schwartzman is in the movie,
is the other person. Yeah. And so, like, in the fake sort of biopic version of it, they play like their managers and record label heads, like the Matador record label head or whatever. But it's like that really like overblown trope that you would see in like Straight Outta Compton or something. Like you have these opportunities and you're blowing them, and you won't go on the Tonight Show. Like, we'll go on the Tonight Show and we'll just do our thing, like just like super like sarcastic and eye rolly or whatever. And it's just funny to see that. But the interesting thing is Schwartzman is clearly also just a Pavement fan, and so near the end you see unguarded, unscripted, like behind the scenes footage of I think them chatting maybe before Pavement's first big like reunited concert that they started a few years ago. And Malkmus we see a lot of this documentary is them in the studio again practicing these old songs to take them back on the road. And there's a moment near the end where he's talking to Schwartzman, like, very earnestly, just sort of saying it's interesting. We've been practicing these songs so long for this tour. We never did that before. And he's like, at some point they're talking about their very, very first show they ever did. He's like, I don't even know if we did band practice for that first show. And he's like embarrassed about that now because he's a professional musician who's like done a lot of things, and he's got the wisdom of age. And he says, like when we were young, we were just always moving on to the next thing. Like we didn't have time to practice before a tour because we were writing the next record or we're doing this. You're always moving on to the next thing. And he's like, and now here we are. It's interesting to take this work that we wrote a long time ago, but to really, really drill down on it and really perfect it because there isn't the next thing. And it was an interesting kind of, not that he doesn't have his next thing. I'm obsessed with that record that came out last summer, The Hard Quartet, which I
those
hate
guys,
saying the name of that. But that double record, that blew my goddamn mind when I heard it.
I should listen to that because everything I've seen from it, that's this band, kind of a super group, although I actually didn't recognize the other guys in the supergroup other than Malkmus.
Yeah, and honestly, the songs that are not Malkmus led are my favorite. I remember like just sending you and Chris just like these long ass text chains. I think even individually about it. I was trying to get everybody to listen to it. It's so good. So anyway, I'm not making it sound like I'm not trying to sound like Malkmus has given up, like he doesn't have more projects. But I mean specifically that Pavement thing. Like there was no like talk of let's record another album in our 50s or whatever. It's just like that was their only project as as Pavement, which was to practice these songs and perfect them to take them back on the road again. And it was just sort of an interesting sort of insight on that process of just like, it's interesting, like after all these years to decide to come back and sort of perfect it in this way.
Mm-hmm. That actually would make me, that's an interesting insight because, again, I'm a real basic B, and I've seen Pavement live too, and one of the things that I was bummed by was that a lot of the songs don't sound like the songs off the record because they like to kind of jangle them up or just kind of get weird with it and have that one guy just yelling in the background for no reason that I can figure out. But I wonder if 5% of that was because literally they just weren't practicing very much. I wonder if I saw them on their latest tour, if they would have tightened a few things up just because of more rehearsal time.
Well, I do think that, I mean, from hearing your description of what you like out of Pavement over the years, I think that you like a very specific kind of Pavement song that I don't think encompasses their sound. Like, they're a noisy band, you know what I mean? And they kind of had a few songs that I think appeal to you. And I know you've said that before. It's like, can they just make one song that doesn't get into the part of Pavement I don't like? And I'm like, that's what I like. Like, I think that I don't think that they went. I think that they've always been really talented, and I think that they've always known what they're doing. I just think that maybe what I'm trying to say here is that with a little bit of age and not having to be like, well, we're on tour, but we're also writing the next record, and we're doing this, and we're doing this. It's just kind of like I can like kind of go back, and I don't know. I think there's sort of a wistfulness to like both age and the creative sort of arc, I think.
Well, throw in the fact that Malcolmus lives in Portland now, and I've like friends of friends whose like kids go to school with him. And so
yeah, me too. My buddy Ben is friends with him. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's like I wonder if there'll ever be an overlap where somehow he ends up on Livewire. Who knows? And that will be difficult for me to keep my chill if that ends up happening. I was also, Andrew, watching documentaries of the much more straightforward variety recently, which is. I watched most of the new Pee Wee Herman documentary that's on HBO. Have you been seeing any clips of this going around, or have you heard anything on this?
I like his noisier stuff more.
Yeah,
No, I only know about it because you mentioned it to me. I don't know if it was on the show or off, but you mentioned it to me recently, and that's still all I know about it.
It's pretty interesting because Paul Rubens decided that I guess he wanted to be part of this documentary project to kind of, I guess, sum up his career and also I think clear some things up and also importantly officially come out, which he had never really been an out person in his life, in his his sort of lifetime, I guess, or his lifetime in the public eye. He wasn't out, and he talks about it a lot in this documentary. What's also interesting is he's at this point when he sits down for this long interview session with this documentary filmmaker, he has been privately battling cancer for like 6 years, and the filmmakers don't know it.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting dynamic because you kind of see a person who is definitely kind of probably thinking about their legacy and their life. And when he talks about death and things like that, it has this real pretty intense quality to it because you know that he knows something that the people making the movie don't know.
That's really, I'm interested in hearing more. I just have a question, maybe not a question, but like when you first mentioned this to me in passing, and again, I think it was off air, I think that I made the assumption that he and the filmmakers were making this all together knowing that this was sort of his swan song. I didn't realize that it was a secret he was keeping from him. That makes it a very different documentary.
Yes. Yeah. And they kind of address that right up at the top. And then it's also very interesting to see the way that Paul Rubens, the person being interviewed, is just he is so all over the map in certain times, and you hear the director going, "Okay, come back to me, Paul. Come back to me right now." Like it's almost like a therapy session, and then Paul Rubens is like, "You're not my therapist," and like they're having these disagreements, which a lot of which get left in the doc is basically like Paul Rubens not wanting to talk about something, whether it's his sexuality or whether it's certain private things, and then the filmmaker kind of drawing it out of him, but they leave in so much stuff that was probably originally not meant to be, and I'm kind of a sucker for that kind of stuff anyway. But it's just an interesting, I said at the top of the show, like I wasn't somebody who watched Pee Wee's Playhouse. Like I didn't really actually get how subversive it really was until like watching. I mean, I really loved Pee Wee's Big Adventure. I loved that movie and still love that movie to this day. But as far as like the other stuff about it, I wasn't like getting up on Saturday morning and watching, Pee Wee's Playhouse or whatever. I didn't have a lot of thoughts about Cherry or, Jambi, the genie or whatever. But like it's really cool to watch this and realize just how actually, like, first of all, Paul Rubens went to art school. He went to Cal Arts, and he was a very, like, avant-garde art weirdo. That's really what he kind of wanted to be doing. But then he was also super ambitious. So he sort of had all these characters that he was doing at the Groundlings. And he realized that, like, the Pee Wee Herman character was the one that seemed to, like, be hitting the most. So at some point he just focused. He goes to try out for SNL and he doesn't get it because when he shows up and everyone there's like, oh, you're a shoo-in. And then the other person auditioning is Gilbert Gottfried. And he's like, oh, we're the same person. And Gilbert gets the gig.
You're gonna fill. If they're not the same person, they fill the weird role, right?
Kind of angsty, weird, skinny guy role went to Gilbert Gottfried instead of Paul Rubens. And so he comes back home from that and he just says, like, okay, I'm just going to make Pee Wee Herman a thing. I'm going to drop all my other characters. I'm just doing Pee Wee. But, like, there just was so much, like, the set design, like, just the story of the people that he hired to actually draw, like, to do the design of that world of the puppets.
For the TV show?
For the TV show. Specifically, and actually really before the TV show, because he was doing it as a live thing at midnight at the Groundlings. So he found these people to help do the set design who were these kind of cartoonists, basically, who had a really specific idea about what and I overuse this word, but the kind of look or aesthetic of the whole thing was going to be. And then just like the artsiness of it. Like, for instance, there was something where he's like feeding his dog. And they literally have a 2-minute close-up of the dog. This is on the TV show. A 2-minute close-up of the dog just eating its food out of the dog food bowl. Just like an extreme close-up of a dog's teeth and tongue. And it just keeps not cutting away from this thing, which, like, by all normal editing purposes of a children's show, it should have. So there was just all these things that he was doing to really try to just make this show as weird as possible, also very inclusive, like it had a very diverse cast. Then also when you know that Paul Rubens was a gay man who was very much not out to the world, but was just doing so much stuff that's obviously really gay coded in the show. Like, he's doing his Christmas special and it's like he opens some door and there's just like these two just oiled up, just shirtless, just like the hottest friggin' dudes you've ever seen who are like decorated this Christmas tree.
Now, was this part of the show that was branded towards kids, though? This part,
it was the Pee Wee Herman Christmas special.
Oh, that's so funny. Because I remember, and I haven't seen this documentary, but I always think of like this. There's this sort of like, I don't know, almost I want to say grainy-ish footage, although that's probably not true. But it aired on Comedy Central way back in the day, but it was archival even then, of like the Pee Wee Herman show that was definitely pre-TV show on stage for adults. And I didn't get the impression it was from the Groundlings. Maybe it was, but it had, Phil Hartman and other like famous people in it. And I remember like being somebody who I think maybe was slightly more plugged into the TV show than you, although I don't want to overstate that, but like being kind of shocked at how like adult and sort of grotty it was, sort of, in its visuals, sort of. And that might have just had to do with the technology of the time. Yeah,
that was also something I didn't realize was that Phil Hartman and Paul Rubens had kind of a big falling out over Phil Hartman getting SNL.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Isn't it? I mean, and then this is where I was kind of like, so Phil Hartman, which we've talked about this before. I mean, Phil Hartman, talk about a crazy life story. He was just a guy who was a graphic designer and was doing the graphic design for basically like album covers for very cool and influential bands at the time. But he's just like, I don't know if he has friends that are in the Groundlings or whatever, but he's just kind of like interested in it, but a little bit too nervous to ever try it. And he also has this other totally interesting career going. And then finally he just like goes for it and does a class with the Groundlings. And everybody there said he was immediately the best person in the cast. Just like, holy shit. And then he goes and eventually tries out for SNL. He gets SNL and he becomes like one of the biggest people on SNL. And I guess that was really difficult for Paul Rubens because now he couldn't be on, Pee Wee anymore. And so they kind of fell out of touch. And then you cut to this, the sort of arc of the documentary is now, Paul Rubens is going to go through these personal trials, one of which is he's caught allegedly exposing himself, i.e. masturbating in an adult theater in Florida, which he pleads no contest to. Then later on, this was other stuff. He also seemed to be a borderline hoarder, like he was a collector of things, but like every shot of his house, which of course he has this, to me, very cool house in the Hollywood Hills that has a swimming pool and a view of the Hollywood sign. I'm like, okay, I get where this is going. But then every picture of the inside of his house is just like stacks of like Tupperware boxes and things. And he was just somebody who collected a lot of stuff. And in all of that stuff he collected, some of it was erotica. And it was just basically like LGBT, mostly gay erotica, like, stud magazines and things like this, that for some reason, it sounds like the LAPD and this one, this guy Delgadillo, who was like running for, I don't know what it was, maybe DA of LA County or something, decided that he was going to really try to prove a point here. This was stuff that, the kind of material that's also in the collection of like an LGBTQ sort of oriented part of a college library, right? You know what I mean? Like this is stuff that's actually historically kind of significant, but they branded it as child porn and kind of went after him on that.
Can I ask you a question? Is that also... Wasn't the
Yes.
actor who played the principal
Jeffrey
of
Ratzenberger?
Ferris
No,
Bueller?
wait.
That's
Yeah,
not
what's that guy's
Ratzenberger, I don't
name?
think. But
No, that's the guy from Cheers.
He was connected to that, right? Like this same
Yeah.
exact bust in some way. Because I remember
Exactly.
people being like, well, if you just read the headlines, it sounds worse than it is, but they were actually collectors. I mean, again, you know more about this than I do, so I'm not
I think
trying to
what
weigh
happened with
in,
Jeffrey
but-
Jones is the name of that
Oh,
guy.
I would have
I
never
think
known
what
that.
happened is that Jeffrey Jones was in trouble for a variety of things he was accused of. I don't know off the top of my head, but I think it was more serious than just the having of the stuff. But the person who alleged that Jeffrey Jones had done something to them had also at one point been at Paul Rubens' house with Jeffrey Jones. And so it kind of looped Paul Rubens into the whole thing, even though there was no allegation that Paul Rubens had like physically acted inappropriately with anyone or anything like that. He kind of got caught up in it because this person had been at his house at one point, this person who was accusing Jeffrey Jones of, I think, way worse stuff.
Oh, okay. So maybe
So it was just
Jones-
kind of, the whole thing was sort of a mess. But anyway, you've got the of course, the sort of typical arc of these things where you have our kind of our hero, if you will, Paul Rubens, and then his rise to the top, and then him kind of, sort of suffering a fall from grace. And then I'm not yet to the end of it where I assume he sort of triumphantly comes back, or at least I know he did a Broadway show that was a really big hit. So I'm guessing that's
Mystery Men might have been. Have you gotten to the Mystery Men?
Yes,
part
we
of
got to the
this?
Mystery Men part.
So was that
was
kind of
actually
a big comeback after his kind of fall from grace, if you will?
It was, but it preceded the second fall from grace, which was the child porn charges. So you have this moment where he's like, everybody is kind of relaxed over the porno theater thing. I remember even in those days going, well, what are people going to that theater for if not what he's accused of doing?
Even
come
back
on.
then, yeah.
Yeah. But so he comes back from that and he starts getting cast in things. He was in the movie Blow. And he's in these things as Paul Rubens. He's not playing Pee Wee. He's in Mystery Men, like you said. He's actually doing a lot of acting work. He also at this time is having a kind of an interesting, I guess you could say, relationship with the actress Debbie Mazur, who I'm just a huge fan of generally, where they're sort of boyfriend and girlfriend, even though she knows that he's gay, and she's interviewed extensively in this, and it's kind of like it's an interesting relationship because he's given her a ring and they're constantly together, but one would assume that this was not something that they were consummating, It's kind of, that's going on. And then right when he's kind of getting everything back on track and he's having all this success, then the next sort of round of stuff hits him. And that's kind of where last night I ran out of steam. I was doing two things. I was watching this movie that I was very interested in, and I was also trying to look for the Northern Lights, and eventually it was too late for me. I am not able to stay at past 12 p.m. anymore.
Well,
so I hit the hay.
I have some more questions about this. So I was
Yes.
going to ask you because he says that you said in this documentary he like kind of fully comes out in a way that he hadn't earlier in his lifetime. Is there any discussion of any knowing now about this Mazar? Is that how you say her name?
Yeah, Debbie Mazar.
Yeah, I can picture her. Although I don't know why I know her. I know
Probably
of
from
her.
the TV show Civil Wars. That she was the front desk, the secretary on in 1991.
I never saw that, although I do think that it would be unsurprising if she was a 90s crush for me, because honestly, who wasn't? But anyway, so is there any discussion of long-term relationships with men or anything? Did he have any?
Well, what happened to him, by his telling, is when he was just graduating from college, he fell deeply in love with someone and with a male partner, and they lived together, and they were they were an item for a number of years, and then they broke up. And what he said was basically when they broke up, it was so devastating for him that he just decided, I'm not going to be an out gay man. So he says he was living his life as a totally out gay man, and then intentionally went back into the closet, like deeply into the closet. And he also decided he was never going to have a serious relationship again because of, I guess, how kind of traumatic the whole thing was.
That
for
must
him.
have been a tough time too when they were in an out relationship and living together. That would have been early 80s or something. Like, am I like,
yeah,
that's,
exactly.
That's a tougher time to do it than the 2000s. Clearly, a lot of stigmatizing. Can I ask you one other question about the tone of this? You were sort of describing him, kind of modern day Pee Wee Herman, kind of telling his story with the filmmakers and the interviewers, and you were sort of saying that at times it was kind of pulling teeth to get him to talk about the things that they wanted him to talk about, but then they would say, okay, reel it back in. Like, he doesn't remind me as a guy who would slip into bits a lot, but am I wrong about that? How
kind of doing bits?
Does he kind of do bits? He kind of is avoiding the tough stuff by slipping into almost a Robin Williams-esque sort of like doing bits.
Yeah, like a Robin Williams on a certain amount of Prozac. Like, it's not as hyper as a Robin Williams, but it's very much like, and he's not doing Pee Wee.
Yeah,
he's just doing this. He's kind of got this running bit going where he'll say something and he'll go, "No, I'm kidding," or am I? No, I'm not being serious. Or is he being serious?
That
like, he did that a lot.
I mean, I love Pee Wee. You've really got me. I really want to watch this now. Although I think it's going to make me deeply sad because I love him and I love Phil Hartman, and I just think there's so much tragedy around both of these stories.
I know, right?
But I do love him. But boy, that sort of sound. I feel like if you were interviewing him on Livewire and he kept doing that to you, you would brain him.
Well, yes. I mean, he would not have survived the interview. Oh, that was the other thing. And somehow I got mad at Howard Stern in all of this, which is a weirdly common thing for me these days. So they're at the part of the arc where it's like they're sort of trying to point out that Paul Rubens' way of going through the world, the big thing they're trying to establish is this guy was super ambitious. And by his own kind of telling, he was super ambitious, including going back in the closet because he knew that being an out gay man would make it really hard for him to have success doing a children's show, things like that. And so, and not because that's how it should be, but because that's unfortunately where the culture was at and probably still is. But they're trying to point out that he and Phil Hartman aren't close anymore. And they show Phil Hartman being interviewed by Stern. And it's like Howard Stern's just being like, it's normal. It's like, it felt so base to me that all he wants to do is try to get Phil Hartman to admit that he and Paul Rubens aren't friends anymore. Yeah. And you can tell that Phil Hartman doesn't really want to talk about it that way because it's never established that they had a huge fight. It's just that they kind of grew apart. They were just not really close. There probably were some hurt feelings, but you can just see Howard Stern just like trying to extract this thing from Phil Hartman that isn't because it's important information, but because Howard Stern just like thrives on just like chaos and controversy and things like that. And it's just like watching Phil Hartman, rest in peace, have to like kind of have this extracted from him kind of against his will in the public space by Howard Stern. Just like it made me feel really sad, actually. That little clip in the show made me feel sad. But I do think it, particularly if you were more dialed into the whole Pee Wee's Playhouse thing, I think you'd find it really interesting. Literally just from like a television production standpoint of like how they were making the show and what was going on with it. Like, anyway, I'm finding it to be very entertaining and informative. And once the Mariners have either triumphed against the Baltimore Orioles tonight or shown that they are not going to win, I will check out of that broadcast and I will check back into my Pee Wee himself documentary. So anyway, that's the plan. I don't know, my friend. Should we wrap her up here on this Tuesday?
It up there.
Okay,
sounds good to me.
Okay, great.
Sorry if I'm a little. I am feeling a little wistful here now. I just
really?
I don't know if I can handle that documentary, to be honest with you. I don't know if
seriously?
I can or not. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Phil, just the Phil Hartman of it all alone is just like Vives and I can like just stop in our tracks with a memory of Phil Hartman, and just like such a tragic ending, such an early loss, and then Pee Wee Herman. I just can't. Not to extend this conversation more, but like it's hard not to get emotional when you think about how he posed for that final photo in the black suit and sort of like preparing for his end, and sort of like seems like a little bit, not in a gross way, but sort of like knowing that he had to like kind of had a certain amount of time to like sort of do what he could for his legacy at the end. It just sounds like it kind of sounds like a lot.
It is a lot, but also I mean, obviously you have to follow your heart on this, but I think that it's a lot, but also it's really informative and really interesting, and it's a side of Paul Rubens that you just rarely saw, because I mean that's the other big part of the movie is he very clearly kind of created this alter ego so that he could then exist in the world. This alter ego of Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah.
And he always wanted people to, and he wanted there to be confusion around if Pee Wee Herman was a real person or not.
Yeah.
Like he didn't ever want it to be about Paul Rubens playing this character. He wanted it to be about this guy called Pee Wee Herman. And then Pee Wee Herman gets really big, and then he's kind of sad that nobody knows who Paul Rubens is.
Yeah, sure.
It's very complicated, but again.
Yeah, I mean, the story in the 80s was Paul Rubens. No, it wasn't. I'm sorry. I'm saying the opposite of what I meant. Pee Wee Herman caught in theater. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I'm still pretty young at this time. And it's like, wait, Pee Wee Herman was caught in the theater?
Right.
Like, he blurred it. And God damn it, the music is playing. Sorry. It just sort of sounds like he was doing in this interview in 2023 or whenever it was recorded on a small micro level what he was doing with his whole life in the 80s and 90s, which was sort of deflecting by slipping into character.
It's not all deflection, for the record.
Yeah.
Just he slips into it sometimes, but I think you do get a lot of good stuff. Anyway. All right. Well, I'll watch it.
I'm emotional thinking that the Mariners
I'll transcribe
might
it for you and forward you a full transcript. I'll have AI transcribe the entire thing, and then you can just read it and decide if you want to watch it or not.
The truth is, I'm just getting emotional thinking the Mariners might not sweep the Baltimore Orioles. And with all due respect to our fans, I love Orioles fans. I love the Orioles for what I know of them, but we should really sweep this series. And if not, it's just going to make me sad.
I'll take 2 out of 3. I'll take 2 out of 3.
You're right, me too.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We are going to be right back here tomorrow. Did you know that this might be the longest-running 5-day-a-week podcast in human history?
That's what I
hear. You might be listening to that right now.
Get at us.
So we're going to
Current.
continue that record-setting pace tomorrow when we come back with more Imaginary Radio. In the meantime, have a great Tuesday, everybody. Take care of yourselves. And please remember, no mountain too tall.
And good luck to all.
Boy, being a disc jockey is really hard. Way harder than I ever imagined. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come back next time for my very next show. Please, I'm begging you.
Power out.